There is something different about this particular moment in time. Not this year in a general sense, not this decade as a concept, but this specific window, the one you are sitting inside of right now, the one that brought you to this exact message on this exact day. Something has shifted in the unseen architecture of things. If you have been paying attention, even loosely, you have already felt it. A strange heaviness that is not quite sadness, a restlessness that has no clear address, a sense that something enormous is right at the edge of happening, close enough that you keep catching yourself holding your breath without knowing why. This moment carries a frequency that is unlike anything that has come before it in your personal history. Seasons like this one do not arrive on a schedule you can predict or a calendar you can mark. They arrive when something in the unseen realm reaches a point of completion, when the preparation that has been happening beneath the surface of your visible life reaches a fullness that can no longer be contained. And what you need to understand, what you need to receive before anything else in this message, is that you did not stumble into this moment by accident. You were brought here. Something was set in motion long before you pressed play, long before you even found this message. And what happened when you arrived here is something that the ancient writings describe in language that most people are not ready to hear. You broke a seal, not intentionally, not with ceremony, not with any awareness of what you were doing, but the act of showing up, the act of continuing to seek even when the seeking felt pointless, the act of not walking away even when everything in your circumstances gave you every reasonable excuse to give up. That persistence, that refusal to go quiet, that is what did it. And what happened in response to that is something so significant that even the messenger Gabriel, the one described in Scripture as a being of such magnitude that every human who encountered him fell to the ground, even he responded to what you set in motion. Now, you might be sitting with that and feeling uncertain. That is completely understandable, because chosen ones, and that is exactly what you are. Chosen ones are almost never the first to recognize what they carry. That is actually one of the clearest signs. So, let me name a few things for you right now, and I want you to notice which ones land somewhere deep and familiar. The first sign is that your dreams have been getting louder and more vivid, not always pleasant, not always easy to interpret, but unmistakably more present, as though something is trying to communicate with you through the one channel that your waking mind cannot block or argue with. The second sign is that you have recently felt a very specific kind of grief that you cannot fully explain to anyone around you. Not grief over a person necessarily, not grief over an obvious loss, but a grief that feels ancient, as though you are mourning something that was supposed to be yours that you cannot even name yet. The third sign is that certain relationships and certain environments that used to feel comfortable now feel like they belong to a version of you that no longer fits. You have not necessarily done anything dramatic. You have not announced any changes. But something inside you has quietly separated from things that used to feel like home. And that separation, as disorienting as it is not a loss. It is a release. The fourth sign is that you keep receiving the same message from completely unrelated sources. A conversation, a song, a line in something you are reading, a thought that arrives in the middle of the night, all of them pointing in the same direction, all of them carrying the same essential word for you. That is not coincidence. That is confirmation. And the fifth sign, the one that perhaps sits the heaviest on you right now, is that you have a persistent inner knowing that you were made for something specific, something significant. And yet you are standing in a place where the outer evidence of that does not yet match the inner certainty. That gap, That space between the knowing and the seeing is not a sign that the knowing is wrong. It is a sign that you are standing precisely at the threshold of the very thing you have been knowing about. Beloved and chosen one, heaven did not bring you to this message to give you more information to carry. Heaven brought you here because what you set in motion by accident, by simply persisting, by simply refusing to let go of something you could not even fully see, has already changed the spiritual atmosphere around your life. The angels have already responded. The seals have already shifted. And what remains now is for you to understand what happened, why it happened, and what comes next. You are not here because you are still waiting for something to begin. You are here because it already has. The seal is broken. The decree has gone out. And this message, this moment, this exact point in time, is the first visible evidence of what has been invisibly true for longer than you know. You are not a person who is hoping to be chosen. You are a person who was chosen before you understood what that word even meant. Chosen before your struggle began. Chosen before the years of confusion and delay. Chosen before the nights that felt like they would never give way to morning. And the reason this specific season feels different, the reason this particular moment carries a weight unlike the ones before it, is because this is the moment the choosing becomes visible. Heaven did not say soon. Heaven said now. Something has been sitting on your chest for a while now, and no one around you has been able to name it accurately. The people who love you have tried. They have offered their best explanations and their most well-meaning advice. They have told you to stay positive, to keep going, to trust the process, to be grateful for what you have. And you have heard all of it, received all of it with as much grace as you could manage, and still gone to bed at night carrying the exact same unnamed weight that all of those words were supposed to lift. That is not a failure of gratitude. That is not a failure of faith. That is the specific experience of someone who is carrying something that the people around them do not yet have the language to describe. So let me try to name it for you today. Not in the language of motivation, not in the language of generic encouragement, but in the language of someone who has sat with enough chosen ones to recognize exactly what you are moving through right now. There's a particular season that comes before the breakthrough, and it does not look the way most people describe breakthrough seasons. It does not look like fire and momentum and dramatic signs. It looks like four very specific things, and I want you to hear each one and notice whether something inside you goes quiet in recognition. The first thing it looks like is a sudden wave of sadness about the past that arrives without warning and without a clear trigger. You could be doing something completely ordinary, washing dishes, driving a familiar road, sitting in a room you have sat in 100 times, and out of nowhere, a wave of grief moves through you that feels connected to years, not just to moments. Not one specific memory, but a whole accumulation of time, of things you hoped for that did not arrive on schedule, of versions of your life that you watched other people step into while you remained in the hallway. That sadness is not weakness. That sadness is your spirit acknowledging the full weight of what the waiting has cost. And that acknowledgement is actually the first movement of release. The second thing it looks like is that familiar places and familiar people suddenly feel heavy and strange in a way you cannot logically explain. Places you have always loved feel slightly foreign. Conversations that used to feel nourishing feel like they are happening in a language you are slowly forgetting how to speak. People you have known for years feel further away than their physical distance should account for. And you begin to wonder whether something is wrong with you, whether you are becoming cold or disconnected or ungrateful. But what is actually happening is that your spirit is separating from what was in preparation for what is coming. The strangeness is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that something is shifting. The third thing it looks like is a recurring image or dream involving something that has not yet been opened. A door that you stand in front of but do not pass through. A room you can see but cannot quite enter. A letter that you hold but have not yet read. These images are not random. They are the language your inner world uses to tell you that there is something prepared for you that is right at the edge of your access. The door in the dream is real. The room is real. And the reason you keep dreaming standing at the threshold is because that is precisely where you are standing right now. Not outside it, not far from it, but at the very edge of it. The fourth thing it looks like is the same essential message appearing in completely unrelated places within a short period of time. A word someone uses in passing that lands differently than it should. A song lyric that seems to be speaking directly into your specific situation. A passage in something you are reading that stops you mid-sentence because it names something you have not told anyone. A thought that arrives in the middle of the night with a clarity that feels less like your own thinking and more like something being delivered. When the same message finds you through multiple unconnected channels, that is not coincidence. That is the way heaven confirms what it is trying to say to someone who has been trained by their circumstances to doubt the first signal. Now, I want to speak to something more specific, because the season of waiting that chosen ones move through is not just emotionally difficult in a general sense. It carries very particular pains that most people around you will not acknowledge because they cannot see them clearly enough to name them. There is the insomnia that is not about anxiety in the clinical sense, but about a spirit that is too awake to the magnitude of what is coming to settle into ordinary rest. You lie down tired, and something in you rises. You close your eyes, and the internal conversation begins. Not the worried kind, not always, but the kind that feels like you are being prepared for something, even as your body is asking to be left alone. There is the loneliness that exists even in the middle of relationship, even in rooms full of people who genuinely love you. It is not about the absence of connection. It is about the presence of a calling that has not yet found its community, a frequency inside you that has not yet found its matching signal in the world around you. That loneliness is not permanent. It is seasonal. And it is specific to people who are being prepared for a level of purpose that requires a particular kind of inner formation before the outer connections can align. There is the feeling of being wronged that you carry quietly, the awareness that certain things were taken from you or withheld from you in ways that were not fair, in ways that changed the trajectory of years and opportunities, and the internal wrestling between bitterness and grace that no one sees because you have learned to present the grace face while the wrestling happens beneath it. And there is the deepest pain of all, the feeling of being misunderstood not just by others but occasionally by yourself. The moments where you look at your own life and cannot reconcile what you know you carry with what you can currently see. That is a specific kind of suffering that belongs almost exclusively to chosen ones, because it requires you to hold faith in something you cannot yet demonstrate to anyone, including yourself on the harder days. Here is what I need you to understand about all of this. The waiting you have been in is not a punishment. I want to say that again, because you need to hear it more than once. The waiting is not a punishment. It is not evidence that you are forgotten or passed over, or less than the people around you who seem to be moving forward. The waiting is a positioning. There is a significant difference between being overlooked and being positioned. And that difference is everything. When someone is overlooked, they are simply not seen. Their presence is not registered. Their value is not recognized. The outcome of being overlooked is erasure, a gradual fading from the spaces that matter. But when someone is positioned, the opposite is true. Positioning requires precision. It requires that every element of what is being prepared, the person, the moment, the assignment, the resources, the connections, the circumstances, all of it must reach a specific state of readiness before the release can happen. Positioning is not comfortable. Positioning often looks, from the inside, exactly like being overlooked. The external experience of waiting feels the same. But the internal reality is completely different. Because in positioning, every single day of the waiting is doing something. Every single day is adding something to you that you will need. Every single day of the season you have been calling, delay is actually preparation you cannot afford to skip. You have not been forgotten. You have been protected. You have been kept in a place where what needed to grow in you could grow without the pressures of premature exposure. And the reason this current moment feels like it carries a different weight, the reason this season has a quality unlike the ones before it, is because the positioning is complete. The preparation has reached its fullness, and what comes now is not more waiting. What comes now is movement. Before I go further, I want to pause and invite you to do something simple. If any part of what I have just described resonates with something true in your own experience, if you recognized yourself in the sadness, in the strangeness, in the recurring door, in the repeated message, I want you to type the word "ready" in the comments right now. Not to perform anything, not to signal anything to anyone else, but as an act of declaration for yourself. Because there is power in the moment a chosen one stops quietly recognizing their own story and begins to speak it, even in a single word. And if this message has already begun to do something in you, if it has named something that has been sitting unnamed for longer than you want to admit, I want to ask you gently and sincerely to consider supporting this work with a small donation. Not because this message is behind a price, it is not, but because messages like this one take time and care and intention to build. And the only way they can continue to reach the people who need them, the chosen ones sitting alone at 3 morning who have never heard their story told back to them with this kind of specificity, is if the people who are touched by them choose to invest in their continuation. There is a donation link available, and if something moved in you today, even a small offering is an act of partnership in getting this message to the next person who needs it as much as you did. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not being punished by a season that seems to have no end. You are a chosen one who is standing in the final hours of a positioning that has been building for years. And the door you have been dreaming about is not a metaphor for something distant. It is the very threshold you are standing at right now, in this moment, in this message, in this particular and unrepeatable point in time that heaven has been arranging longer than you know. You have been carrying an awareness for a long time now, an awareness that something in you is different, that something in you was built for more than what your current circumstances reflect, and that awareness, as sustaining as it is, can also become its own kind of weight when it is not paired with something practical to do with it. Because knowing you are chosen is one thing. Knowing what to do with that knowledge on a Tuesday afternoon, in the middle of an ordinary week, in the middle of a life that has not yet caught up with what you carry inside it, that is something else entirely. And that is what I want to give you today. Not more language about who you are, but a specific, simple, and genuinely powerful practice that you can begin today. in the body and the life you currently have, without any special equipment, without any prior experience, and without any requirement to have everything figured out first. Before I give you the steps, I want to explain why this particular practice works. Because understanding the reason behind something is what separates a practice that changes you from a practice that you do for 3 days and then abandon because it did not feel like enough. The reason this works is rooted in research that researchers in the field of neuroscience and something that ancient spiritual traditions have both been pointing toward for a very long time, from completely different directions and with completely different language, arriving at the same essential truth, and that truth is this: the state of your inner world at any given moment is not fixed. It is not a permanent condition of your nervous system or your personality or your history. It is a frequency, and frequencies can be shifted, not by force, not by willpower, not by grinding harder or thinking more positively in the surface sense, but by deliberately creating the internal conditions that allow a higher frequency to become the dominant signal in your system. The practice I am about to give you has 3 steps. Each step is simple. None of them require you to be in a particular emotional state to begin. You do not need to feel hopeful to start. You do not need to feel faith to start. You only need to be willing to show up for 7 minutes, and the practice itself will do the rest. This practice is called the return protocol. It is called that because each time you do it, you are returning to the frequency you were designed to carry, returning to the state of mind and spirit that your highest self operates from naturally, returning to the internal condition that was yours before the years of waiting and the weight of the struggle began to layer themselves over it. You are not building something new. You are returning to something original. Here is how it works. Step 1 is what I call the unclaimed gratitude. And I want to be specific about what this means, because it is not the gratitude practice you have likely heard about before. This is not about listing the good things in your life. This is about something more precise and more powerful than that. I want you to think of something that did not happen to you, something that could have gone very wrong, something that was heading in a direction that would have cost you significantly and then did not. A relationship that ended before it destroyed you. A path that closed before you went too far down it. A loss that, with the distance of time, you can now see was actually a redirection. A door that did not open that, had it opened, would have led you somewhere you were not equipped to survive at that point in your journey. Most gratitude practices focus on what was given. This step focuses on what was withheld on your behalf. And the reason that distinction matters is that it moves your spirit into a very specific kind of trust. The kind that says the hand that has been guiding your life has not only been giving, it has also been protecting. And sometimes the protection looks like absence, looks like delay, looks like doors that would not open no matter how hard you knocked. When you practice gratitude for what did not happen, you begin to see the whole architecture of your story differently. You begin to see that the gaps were not neglect, they were design. Take about 2 to 3 minutes for this first step. Sit quietly, or stand if sitting feels too passive for where you are emotionally today, and let 1 or 2 specific instances come to mind. You do not need to manufacture feelings about them. You do not need to perform emotion. Simply acknowledge, internally, with whatever words feel most natural to you, that something or someone was watching your path in ways you did not always recognize, and that what appeared to be absence was sometimes the most active form of intervention available. Step 2 is what I call the time declaration, and this step connects directly to something I will go deeper on later in this message, a concept about time that will reframe everything you think you understand about where you are in your story. But for now, in the practice itself, the step is this. After you have completed your unclaimed gratitude, I want you to speak a single declaration out loud, not in your head, out loud, even quietly, even if you are in a place where speaking quietly is all that is available to you. The reason it must be spoken aloud is that spoken declarations do something that internal thoughts do not. Engage your physical body in the agreement. They move the intention from the realm of thought into the realm of sound, which is frequency, which is exactly the domain we are working in. The declaration is this. You say, out loud, in your own voice, what you know to be true about this moment in time. Not what you see, not what the evidence currently suggests, but what you know at the level beneath the evidence. You speak to the season you are in, as though you already understand its purpose. You speak to the waiting as though you already know it has been building something irreplaceable. You speak to the closed doors as though you already trust that each one was a form of navigation rather than rejection. You do not need a script for this. In fact, a script would limit it. What you need is the willingness to open your mouth and say something true, something you believe at the deepest level, even when the surface level contradicts it. Even 2 or 3 sentences are enough. What matters is that they are yours, that they come from the specific geography of your own story, and that they are spoken in the present tense, not as a hope for the future, but as a declaration of what is already real in the unseen realm. Take about 1 to 2 minutes for this step. Do not rush it. Do not perform it. Speak it like someone who is tired of waiting for permission to say the truest thing they know. Step 3 is the 7 minutes of silence. And I want to explain this step carefully because silence in a culture that is almost entirely unequipped for it is actually the most challenging and the most transformative part of this practice. After you have completed the unclaimed gratitude and the spoken declaration, I want you to sit in complete silence with your eye closed for 7 minutes. Not guided silence, not music, not ambient sound, true silence, or as close to it as your environment allows. During these 7 minutes, your only instruction is this. Do not try to think, and do not try not to think. Simply be present to whatever arises without chasing it or pushing it away. If a thought comes, let it come, and let it pass like a cloud through an open sky. If an emotion rises, let it rise without immediately analyzing it or assigning it a meaning. If nothing seems to happen at all, that is completely fine and completely normal, because the most significant work that happens in these 7 minutes is not the work you can observe or report on. It is the work that happens beneath the observable level, at the level of frequency, at the level where your nervous system begins to recalibrate, where the accumulated tension of the waiting begins to have somewhere to release to, where the gap between your inner knowing and your outer experience begins, very quietly and very powerfully, to close. 7 minutes. That number is not arbitrary. There is a specific reason that 7 minutes is the threshold that this practice operates within, and it connects to something in the science of how your brain processes frequency and shifts its dominant operating state. Something I will introduce you to shortly in this message that will give you a much more complete picture of what is actually happening in your brain during this practice and how you can deepen its effect significantly with a tool that was specifically designed to accelerate exactly this kind of shift. But for now, what I want you to take away from these 3 steps is something simpler than science. I want you to understand that this practice is an act of alignment. Every time you do it, you are aligning your internal frequency with the frequency of what has been promised to you. You are not begging. You are not convincing anyone of anything. You are not earning something you have not already been given. You are simply coming back into resonance with something that is already true, already prepared, already moving toward you, and removing the static that has been making it harder for you to receive the signal clearly. The chosen one does not wait passively. The chosen one does not simply endure the season and hope that something changes from the outside. The chosen one practices the return again and again and again on the ordinary days, on the discouraged days, on the days when nothing about the outer landscape seems to be shifting, because that consistent return is itself the signal that something in the unseen realm responds to. That is the act of persistence that breaks seals. That is the act of showing up that moves heaven. Not the dramatic gestures, not the grand declarations made in moments of peak emotion, but the quiet, faithful, 7-minute daily return of a chosen one who has decided that they will not stop coming back to what they know is true. Do this today, not tomorrow, not when you are in a better space emotionally, not when your circumstances feel more aligned. Today, in the life you are currently living, with the feelings you are currently carrying, with the questions that are still unanswered and the promises that have not yet materialized. Today, you return, and when you do, something responds. Something that has been waiting for exactly this signal begins to move on your behalf. And what happens next, both in the unseen realm and in the very practical and tangible and scientifically explainable mechanics of your own brain, is something you need to understand fully, because it changes everything about how you approach the days ahead. There is a reason the practice I just gave you works the way it does, and it is not only spiritual, though the spiritual dimension is absolutely real. There is also a scientific explanation for what happens in those 7 minutes of silence, in that spoken declaration, in that specific quality of internal stillness that the return protocol creates. And understanding the science does not diminish the spiritual reality of what you are experiencing. It deepens it, because when you discover that what heaven has been doing in your life for years is also precisely what the most advanced research in neuroscience has been pointing toward, it does something to your confidence that no amount of encouragement alone can replicate. It tells you that what you carry is not imaginary. It is measurable, it is real, and it has been documented. Here is what the researchers have found. Chosen ones, people who carry the specific combination of deep sensitivity, persistent inner knowing, creative vision, and the particular kind of suffering that comes from being built for something larger than their current environment. These individuals carry a specific neurological frequency, not as a metaphor, as a measurable reality. When the brains of highly creative individuals, of spiritual leaders, of people who demonstrate what researchers call breakthrough cognition, are studied under controlled conditions, what shows up consistently is an elevated presence of a particular type of brainwave activity. Researchers call it gamma. And gamma is, in the most precise scientific language available, the frequency of the chosen one. Gamma brainwaves operate at the highest frequency of any measured brainwave state. They are associated with moments of profound insight, with the kind of clarity that arrives suddenly after a long period of searching, with what psychologists call peak experiences, and what spiritual traditions have always called moments of divine download. Gamma is the frequency of the eureka moment. It is the frequency of flow states, of deep creative breakthroughs, of the kind of cognitive integration where disparate pieces of information suddenly organize themselves into a single coherent and transformative understanding. When gamma is active and dominant in your brain, you think differently, you perceive differently. You access parts of your own intelligence and intuition that are simply not available to you in lower frequency states. And here is what makes this directly relevant to your story. The people who demonstrate the highest levels of gamma activity are not, as you might expect, the people whose lives have been the smoothest or whose path has been the most straightforward. They are very often the people who have moved through extended periods of deep internal processing, through seasons of waiting and isolation, and the particular kind of refinement that comes from not being allowed to take shortcuts. The brain, it turns out, builds its capacity for gamma, not in spite of the difficult seasons, but through them. The very experience of sustained internal pressure, of holding faith in something unseen, of continuing to return to a deep inner knowing. Even when the external evidence contradicts it, these experiences literally reshape the neural architecture in ways that increase the brain's capacity for the highest frequency states. You have been building something in your brain during the years of your waiting. Something measurable, something real, something that is now ready to be activated in a way that changes how you move through the world. Now, the bridge between where your brain currently operates and where it is capable of operating, the bridge between your current frequency and the full activation of your gamma capacity, is something that a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers has spent more than 30 years studying. Dr. Rivers was trained at MIT, one of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, and his research has included collaboration with NASA on studies of human cognitive performance under conditions of extreme pressure and isolation. He has spent decades asking a single question that most of his colleagues considered either too simple or too strange to be worth serious investigation. The question was this: if the brain has a highest frequency state, a state of peak clarity and creative power and intuitive accuracy, why do so few people access it consistently? And is there a way to make access to that state reliable, repeatable, and available to anyone, regardless of their background or training or circumstances? The answer Dr. Rivers arrived at, after more than 30 years of research and thousands of hours of study involving participants from radically different backgrounds, is one of the most practically significant discoveries in the field of brain science. And it is built on a principle that your brain already knows how to do naturally. It is called brainwave entrainment. Here is the simple version of how it works. Your brain, at any given moment, is producing electrical activity that can be measured as waves of frequency. These waves shift depending on your state, slower and deeper in sleep, faster and more reactive in stress, and at their highest and most integrated in states of peak insight and creative flow. What brainwave entrainment does is provide your brain with an external frequency signal delivered through precisely calibrated sound and allow your brain to synchronize with that signal naturally. Your brain does this automatically. It does not require effort or training or years of meditation practice. It is a built-in function of your neural architecture, the same function that causes you to feel sleepy when you hear rain on a roof, or calm when you hear certain kinds of music. The brain listens to frequency and responds to it. Brainwave entrainment uses that natural responsiveness deliberately, with scientific precision, to guide your brain into a specific target state. The sounds used in this process include what are called binaural beats, which are two slightly different tones delivered separately to each ear, creating a third frequency inside the brain itself that corresponds to the target brainwave state. They also include isochronic tones, which are rhythmic pulses of sound that reinforce the target frequency through a different auditory pathway. Together, these technologies create an audio environment that does something that years of meditation practice can produce, but that can also be accessed by someone who has never meditated a single day in their life in a fraction of the time. Dr. Rivers combined these technologies with the specific frequency signatures associated with theta and gamma brainwave states. Theta waves, which operate between 4 and 8 cycles per second, are the frequency of deep creativity, accelerated learning, intuitive access, and the meditative states that ancient traditions have always associated with direct spiritual perception. Gamma waves, as we have already discussed, are the frequency of peak insight, cognitive integration, and what Dr. Rivers calls the genius state. The tool he created is called the Genius Wave, and it is a precisely engineered 7-minute audio track that guides your brain through a theta-gamma progression designed to activate the full spectrum of your highest cognitive and intuitive capacity. 7 minutes. That is the duration of the return protocol I gave you earlier, and that is not a coincidence. Dr. Rivers found, through extensive testing, that 7 minutes is the optimal window for full brainwave entrainment without cognitive fatigue. Shorter than 7 minutes, and the brain does not have time to complete the synchronization cycle. Longer than 7 minutes, and the returns diminish as the brain begins to adapt to the signal. 7 minutes is the precise threshold where the entrainment is complete, where the shift from your baseline frequency to your peak frequency is fully accomplished, and where the effects on clarity, creativity, and intuitive access are at their maximum. I want to tell you about someone who used the Genius Wave in circumstances that were not so different from yours. A woman in her mid-40s who had spent years feeling like she was standing at the edge of a life she could not quite step into. She had the sense of purpose, the inner knowing, the persistent feeling that she was made for something specific. She also had the exhaustion, the unexplained grief, the insomnia, the relationships that felt increasingly misaligned. She began using the Genius Wave for 7 minutes each morning before anything else, before her phone, before the news, before the demands of the day had a chance to set the frequency of her nervous system. Within the first 2 weeks, she reported that her thinking felt cleaner than it had in years. Within the first month, a professional opportunity arrived that she described as coming from a direction she had completely stopped expecting. She said the most surprising thing was not the opportunity itself, but the fact that when it came, she recognized it immediately and knew exactly what to do with it, as though she had been preparing for it all along. Because she had been, and the Genius Wave gave her brain the access it needed to operate from the frequency where that recognition was possible. Now, I want to address something honestly before I tell you how to access this tool, because I know some of you are sitting with a very reasonable thought right now. You are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and you are right. It is not nothing. That thought is completely valid, and I want you to hold it without apology. Because the fact that you are thoughtful about how you invest your resources is not a sign of limitation. It is a sign of wisdom. What I want to offer in response to that thought is not a dismissal of it, but a reframe. The question is not whether $39 is a significant amount. The question is what $39 of access to your own highest frequency state, used consistently every morning for the next 90 days, is worth relative to the cost of continuing to operate below your capacity for another season. The regular price of the Genius Wave is $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for $39. That reduced price is available for a limited time and for a limited number of people because Dr. Rivers has been deliberate about not saturating this tool in a market where its integrity could be compromised. It comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, completely unconditional. No questions asked, because Dr. Rivers has built this tool for chosen ones who have already spent enough of their lives taking risks on things that did not deliver. The guarantee is his commitment that this one will. One important thing I need to say clearly. There are imitation versions of this tool circulating online. Please do not purchase from any source other than the single link in the pinned comment below this video. The imitation versions have not been calibrated with the precision that the original requires, and an incorrectly calibrated brainwave entrainment tool does not simply fail to work. It can produce the wrong frequency shifts, which is worse than no shift at all. The only version that carries the full research and the full guarantee is the one available through the pinned link. And that is the only one I will ever point you toward. This offer will not be available indefinitely. The pricing window is limited. The quantity available at this price is limited. And when it closes, it closes. If something in you recognized itself in this message, if the science of what I just described landed somewhere true in you, if you felt even a quiet yes when I described what gamma activation makes possible, do not let this moment pass without acting on that recognition. The chosen one who is ready does not wait for a more convenient moment. They recognize the appointed time when it arrives. And this is it. Before we move forward, I need to stay here for a moment. I need to stay here because what I am about to say is something that the language of motivation almost never makes room for. And yet, it is something that every chosen one who has been in an extended season of waiting carries in a place that does not get addressed often enough. We have talked about the science. We have talked about the tool. We have talked about the frequency and the positioning and the preparation. And all of that is real and all of that matters. But before we go any further into what is coming, we need to sit honestly with what the waiting has taken, not to dwell there permanently, not to build a home in the grief of it, but because the chosen one who moves forward without fully acknowledging what the season cost them carries that unacknowledged weight into the next chapter, and it becomes the thing that quietly limits what they can receive when the breakthrough finally arrives. So I am going to be honest with you right now, and I am asking you to let this honesty land without immediately reframing it into something more comfortable. There will be time for the reframe, but first, let us simply be truthful about what has been taken. The years of waiting have taken relationships from you. Not just relationships that ended, but relationships that never began because you were in a season that did not have the bandwidth for new connection, because you were carrying too much internal weight to show up as the version of yourself that attracts the kind of depth you were actually built for. There are people you should have been building with during these years. Friendships that should have deepened, a partnership, perhaps, that should have had more room to breathe and grow, a community that should have known you better by now. And the absence of those connections is not a small thing. It is years of human warmth and shared history that cannot simply be manufactured retroactively. That loss is real, and you are allowed to grieve it without being told immediately that everything happens for a reason. The years of waiting have taken career ground from you, not just opportunities in the abstract sense, but specific windows, specific doors were opening that you were not positioned to walk through, because the weight of the season had depleted the energy and the confidence and the clarity that those moments required. You have watched people move into spaces that you know with a certainty that is not arrogance but simply honest self-awareness that you were equally or more qualified for. You have seen your own ideas appear in the world under someone else's name, not because they stole from you, but because they were in a season that allowed them to act while you were in a season that required you to wait. That is a specific kind of pain that has very few spaces where it is considered appropriate to name it. I am naming it here. That loss is real. The years of waiting have taken from you the freedom to speak your largest dreams out loud without immediately managing the listener's reaction. At some point in your season, you learned to edit yourself. You learned to present the smaller, more defensible version of what you carry. The version that will not invite the kind of skeptical response that you no longer had the reserves to absorb. You learned to keep the biggest and truest things about your calling in a private interior space, because the cost of exposing them to the wrong audience at the wrong time had proven to be higher than you could afford. That self-editing, that careful management of what you share and with whom and how much, has become so habitual that there are days when you are not entirely sure anymore which version of your vision is the real one and which is the edited one. The chosen one was not designed to carry their purpose in secret. That compression, that containment, has a weight that accumulates over time in ways that affect everything. And the years of waiting have taken something perhaps more precious than any of the above. They have taken, at least partially, your native faith in yourself. Not your faith in God, not necessarily your faith in promise, but your specific, personal, embodied confidence that you are capable of receiving and carrying and executing what you were built for. The waiting, particularly when it extends beyond what feels reasonable, has a way of installing a quiet voice that was never there at the beginning, a voice that has learned to insert doubt at precisely the moments when you are closest to stepping forward. That voice is not your voice. It was given to you by the season, by the accumulation of delays and disappointments, and moments where you gathered your courage and moved towards something, and the outcome did not match the effort. That voice is not the truth about you, but it has been living in you long enough that it can be difficult to distinguish it from your own. I want you to sit with all of that for a moment. All four of those things: the relationships, the career, the silenced dreams, the eroded self-trust. I am not asking you to wallow. I am asking you to be honest. I am asking you to let yourself fully register the actual cost of what you have been through. Because that registration, that full and unflinching acknowledgement, is what makes genuine healing possible, as opposed to the kind of forward movement that is really just avoidance, dressed up in positive language. Now I want to tell you about someone who understood this kind of loss from the inside. His name was Joseph, and his story is one of the most unflinching accounts of what it costs to be chosen that has ever been recorded. Joseph was a young man who carried something unmistakable from early in his life. He had dreams, not just ordinary dreams, but the kind of vivid, directional, unmistakably significant dreams that we spoke about at the beginning of this message. The kind that chosen ones recognize because they carry a weight and a clarity that ordinary sleep does not produce. He knew something about his future. He knew it with a certainty that was inconvenient and socially costly in the extreme. And what happened to him as a direct result of carrying that knowing, as a direct result of being chosen, was not reward, not recognition, not the fast-tracked advancement that our current cultural narrative around giftedness would suggest. What happened to him was that the people closest to him, the ones who should have been his greatest protectors and advocates, stripped him of the one visible symbol of his favor and threw into a pit and then sold him. into slavery, into a foreign country, into a life that bore absolutely no resemblance to the dreams he had been given. I am not going to tell you what happened next. Not yet, because the point I need you to sit with right now is not the ending. The point is the pit. The point is the specific experience of being someone who gave genuine and God-given knowing about their own purpose, and then finding themselves in circumstances so contrary to that, knowing that the only reasonable conclusion available to the natural mind is that the knowing was wrong, that the dreams were self-deception, that the favor was imagined, that the pit is the truth and the vision was the lie. Joseph sat in that pit, and before the pit there was the stripping, the removal of the coat, the visible thing, the outer marker of his distinction, the thing that everyone around him could see and that his brothers could not tolerate. Sound familiar? The chosen one almost always loses the outer markers of their distinction before they step into the fullness of it. The visible symbols get removed. The external confirmations get stripped away. And what remains is only the interior knowing, the thing that cannot be taken because it lives too deep to reach, the thing that persists even when every outward sign contradicts it. You know that interior knowing. You have been living in it, and sometimes living on it as the only available sustenance, for longer than you should have had to. And like Joseph in the pit, you have had days where you looked at the gap between where you are and where you know you were made to be, and the distance felt not like a journey still in progress, but like evidence that you were wrong about yourself all along. You were not wrong. Joseph was not wrong. The pit was not the final word. But before we get to what comes after the pit, before we move into the language of what is already in motion on your behalf, I needed you to hear that your grief about what the waiting has cost you is not faithlessness. It is not ingratitude. It is not a sign that you have failed some spiritual test. It is the honest reckoning of someone who has been carrying something real through genuinely difficult terrain, and who deserves to have that cost witnessed and named before being asked to take the next step forward. The waiting has been costly. What it has produced in you is irreplaceable. Both of those things are true at the same time, and you do not have to choose between them. You do not have to pretend the cost was small in order to receive the promise. You do not have to minimize what was taken in order to be grateful for what remains. You are allowed to grieve the years with full honesty, and also to turn your face toward what is coming with full expectancy. That is not contradiction. That is the specific emotional complexity of the chosen one who has been through the fire and is now standing at the edge of the field on the other side of it. What was taken from you has been accounted for. The years that the waiting consumed are not simply gone. They are being returned, not in the sense of rewinding time, but in the sense that what is coming carries within it a restoration that is disproportionate to the loss. A return that does not simply replace what was taken but transforms the taking itself into part of the foundation of what is being built. That is the economy of the chosen one's journey. Nothing is wasted. Not the pit, not the stripping, not the years in the foreign country, not the nights of inexplicable grief, not the silenced dreams, not the eroded confidence. All of it has been working. All of it is being woven. And what is being made from it is something that could not have been made any other way. What you just allowed yourself to feel in the previous few minutes is not a detour from the message. It is the message. Because what I am about to give you now, this new way of seeing the time you have been living inside of, can only be fully received by someone who has been honest enough to first acknowledge what that time has cost. The reframe I am about to offer you is not a way of avoiding the pain. It is a way of understanding it from a height that changes everything about how you carry it forward. And the language I want to use to give you that height is not modern. It is not the language of self-help or productivity or even of contemporary theology. It is language that is thousands of years old. Language that was developed by people who had lived long enough and suffered deeply enough and observed carefully enough to recognize patterns in human experience that our current culture has largely forgotten how to name. Before I bring you into this language, I want to name the core of what this entire message is about, because it will help you receive what follows with the clarity it deserves. The core emotion of this video, the thing that is running underneath every word I have spoken so far, is the shock and the awe of discovering that your unconscious actions have already set divine forces in motion on your behalf. You did not plan to break a cosmic seal. You did not wake up one day and decide to do something significant enough to bring heaven to attention. You simply persisted. You simply kept showing up. You simply refused to go quiet. And without knowing it, that persistence was an act of such profound spiritual significance that it triggered a response in the unseen realm that the ancient writings describe as the movement of heaven itself. That is the core of what you need to understand about the time you have been living in. And the two concepts I am about to give you are the most precise tools available in any language for understanding why that is true. The first concept is one that comes from ancient Greek, and it is the word kairos. To understand kairos, you first need to understand its opposite, which is a word called chronos. Chronos is clock time. It is the time that ticks. It is the time that accumulates in seconds and minutes and hours and days and years. Chronos is the time that your calendar measures and your birthday marks and your aging body reflects. Chronos is the time that feels like it is passing without you, the time that you have been watching move while your circumstances stayed still. Chronos is the time that can feel like your enemy, the time that whispers that you are behind, that you are late, that the window is closing, that other people your age are further along, that too many years have already been spent in the waiting. Kairos is something completely different. Kairos is not measured in duration. It cannot be tracked on a clock or marked on a calendar. Kairos is the appointed moment, the specific and unrepeatable intersection of preparation and purpose and divine timing that creates a window unlike any other. In the ancient Greek understanding, Kairos was often personified as a figure who had to be seized by the forelock as he passed because he had no hair at the back of his head. The image was this: Kairos comes toward you, and if you recognize him and reach out at the right moment, you can catch him. But if you hesitate, if you wait until he has passed, there is nothing to hold on to. The moment is gone. What I need you to understand about your current situation is this: the years you have been living inside of Chronos time, the accumulating days of waiting and preparation, and the slow grinding work of becoming, those years were not wasted time. They were the conditions under which Kairos was being prepared. You cannot have a Kairos moment without the Chronos foundation that made you ready for it. The waiting was not the enemy of your appointed moment. The waiting was what made your appointed moment possible. And the reason this current season feels different, the reason this particular message landed in front of you at this particular time, is that you are no longer living in Chronos time alone. You have crossed into Kairos. The appointed moment has arrived, not as a reward for your patience, not as a prize at the end of a long race, but as the natural and inevitable convergence of everything that has been building in you during the Chronos years, meeting everything that heaven has been preparing for you on the other side. This is not positioning that comes after effort. This is positioning that was always the destination of the journey you have been on. Kairos does not care about your feelings of readiness. It does not wait for you to feel prepared or confident or worthy. It arrives when the preparation is complete, regardless of whether you have caught up emotionally to what the preparation has been building. And the fact that you are here, in this message, in this moment, is itself the evidence that the Kairos threshold has been crossed. The second concept I want to give you comes from the ancient Hebrew language, and it is a word that most people translate simply as waiting. But that translation loses almost everything that makes the word significant. The word is kava, and the reason the translation of simply waiting is inadequate is that kava is not a passive word. It is not the word you use for someone sitting in a waiting room, with their hands in their lap, watching the clock, hoping their name gets called. Kava is a word that carries within it a physical metaphor of extraordinary power. The word kava describes the action of braiding a rope. Think about what braiding actually involves. It is not passive. It is an active, skilled, intentional process of taking separate strands that individually are relatively weak and limited in their load-bearing capacity, and intertwining them with precision and intention, until what you have created is something dramatically stronger than any of the individual strands could ever be alone. The tension is part of the process. The twisting is part of the process. The pressure applied to each strand as it is woven around the others is not incidental to the rope's final strength. It is the source of the rope's final strength. Without that pressure, without that tension, without that precise and sustained work of interweaving, you do not have a rope. You have a collection of threads. Now hear this in the context of your own story. The years you have been waiting, the years of tension and pressure, and the particular experience of feeling twisted around circumstances that were not of your choosing, those years were not simply years of endurance. They were years of braiding. Every strand of your character that was tested is a strand that was being woven. Every experience of loss or disappointment or confusion that you moved through and did not allow to break you is a strand that was being added to the rope. Every morning that you showed up and returned to your knowing, even when your circumstances gave you every reason to abandon it, is a strand that was being pulled tight and woven in with the others. You were not just waiting, you were being assembled. The pressure was not evidence of neglect. The pressure was the mechanism of your construction, and so the declaration that comes from kava is not the declaration of someone who is still hoping something will happen. It is the declaration of someone who understands that what the waiting has been doing to them is not damage. It is the formation of a structural integrity that could not have been achieved any other way. You are not delayed. You are not behind. You are not a person who missed their window or used up their chances or arrived too late for what was promised. You are a rope that has been braided under tension for exactly as long as the braiding required. And what comes next in your story is not the continuation of the braiding. What comes next is the moment when the rope is put to use, when the thing it was being made for finally requires the strength that only the braiding could have created. I want you to sit with both of these concepts together for a moment, because they are not separate ideas. They are two descriptions of the same reality from two different angles. Kairos tells you that the appointed moment has arrived, that the convergence of preparation and purpose and divine timing that your Chronos years were building toward is not coming. It is here, and Kava tells you that you are not the same person who entered this season of waiting. The braiding has changed you at a structural level. The person standing at the Kairos threshold today is not the person who entered the Chronos years of preparation. You are stronger. You are more integrated. You carry a kind of wisdom that cannot be learned from books or borrowed from other people's experience. It was woven into you through the specific and personal and irreplaceable process of your own journey. Now, hear the hour of revelation, because this is the moment in the message where what has been building across everything I have said reaches its fullness. The hour of revelation is the moment when the chosen one finally understands, not just that they have been prepared, not just that the timing is right, not just that the waiting was purposeful, but why. Why they specifically why. This specific path. Why these specific losses and this specific stripping and these specific thick years in the foreign country of waiting. The hour of revelation is when the calling finally has a name. And when the calling has a name, the pain that it required has a name too. And when the pain has a name, it transforms. It does not disappear. It does not pretend to have been easy. But it becomes something you can stand on rather than something you are standing in. You have been enduring things that you did not fully understand. You have been carrying a calling that you could feel but could not always articulate. You have been protecting something in yourself that you could not always defend or explain to the people around you. And the reason for all of it, the reason for the specific shape of your suffering, and the specific texture of your waiting, and the specific way the stripping happened, and the specific form the isolation took, is that your calling required exactly this formation. Not a general formation. Not the formation that anyone with sufficient willpower could have produced. The specific, precise, irreplaceable formation of you, this particular chosen one, for this particular assignment, at this particular moment in time. The final pain has a name, and that name is not punishment. That name is not delay. That name is not evidence of unworthiness or forgotten status or cosmic indifference. The name of the final pain is the calling, and you are standing inside the hour of revelation right now, in this message, in this moment, where that name is being spoken over your life for the first time with the fullness it deserves. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. The appointed time has come, and you are already inside it. Something is shifting around you right now, and I want you to pay close attention to what I am about to describe, because it is already happening, not as a future possibility, not as a conditional promise that depends on your performance or your worthiness or your ability to sustain the right emotional state. It is already in motion. The seal that was broken by your persistence, the Kairos threshold you have already crossed, the braiding that has already reached its completion, these are not preparations for movement. They are the first evidence of movement that has already begun in the unseen architecture of your life. And what I want to do right now is make that movement as concrete and specific and recognizable as possible, so that when it shows up in your daily experience, which it will, you will know exactly what you are looking at. Let me tell you about the 3 specific areas where you are going to feel this shift first. Because the movement does not arrive all at once, and it does not always arrive in the form you are expecting. It arrives in specific, targeted, recognizable ways. And knowing what to look for is the difference between a chosen one who receives what is coming and a chosen one who walks right past it because it did not look the way they imagined it would. The first area is your inner world. Before anything changes on the outside, before the external circumstances begin to reflect what is already true in the unseen realm, you are going to notice a change in the quality of your internal experience. Not a dramatic change, Not a sudden flood of confidence or an overwhelming sense of peace that erases all the complexity of where you have been. Something quieter and more substantial than that. You are going to notice that the quality of your mornings is beginning to shift. That the first waking moments, which have often been the hardest, the ones where the weight of everything lands before you have had a chance to build up the day's defenses, those moments are going to begin to carry a different texture. A quietness that is not numbness. A steadiness that is not resignation. Something that feels, if you let yourself name it honestly, like the very early light before full sunrise, where everything is still dim, but the darkness has already lost its authority. You are also going to notice that your intuition is getting sharper and faster. The gap between the moment a thought arrives and the moment you trust it is going to close. You are going to find yourself knowing things before you have reasoned your way to them, acting on perceptions that arrive without full logical justification, and discovering that those perceptions were accurate. This is your gamma frequency activating. This is the braided rope being put to use. The years of internal processing have created a depth of pattern recognition in you that is now beginning to operate at a speed and a clarity that will surprise you. Do not dismiss it. Do not interrogate it back into silence. The chosen one in the season of activation learns to move with their intuition rather than behind it. The second area where the shift is going to make itself felt is in the atmosphere around your calling. I am not talking yet about the practical outcomes, about the specific opportunities or the open doors or the tangible evidences of breakthrough. I am talking about something that happens just before all of that. The moment when the internal question of what am I supposed to be doing with my life begins to answer itself. Not through a dramatic revelation, not through a burning bush or a voice from the sky, but through a series of small and unmistakable confirmations that begin to accumulate with a frequency and a specificity that cannot be reasonably attributed to coincidence. You are going to find that the things you are naturally drawn to, the activities and conversations and subjects that light something up in you without requiring any effort or performance, are going to begin aligning with each other in ways that point clearly in a single direction. The scattered interests and the diverse experiences and the seemingly unrelated chapters of your journey are going to begin to organize themselves into a coherent pattern, like puzzle pieces that have been sitting on a table finally being assembled into the image they were always part of. You have been wondering what connects all of it, wondering how the different threads of your story add up to anything unified. The answer is coming. Not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience of increasing clarity that arrives one small step at a time, each step revealing the next, each confirmation pointing toward the one that follows it. The third area is the one that will feel the most surprising, and it is this. The resources and the opportunities that are aligned with your calling are going to begin arriving in ways that circumvent the channels you have been trying to force them through. Here is what that means in practical terms. You have been working hard. You have been pushing. You have been trying to create movement through effort and strategy and the disciplined application of will, and those things have their place. I'm not saying effort is irrelevant, but what you are going to begin experiencing is something that chosen ones describe with a kind of quiet wonder, the experience of things arriving without the strain, of doors that open before you have finished knocking, of connections that form without the engineering, of opportunities that find you rather than requiring you to hunt them down. This is not laziness. This is alignment. When the frequency of your life matches the frequency of what is prepared for you, The movement stops feeling like struggle and starts feeling like recognition. You stop fighting your way toward your purpose and start being drawn into it by a pull that feels more natural than effort, more inevitable than planning. That shift from straining toward to being drawn into is one of the most recognizable signatures of a chosen one who has crossed the Kairos threshold and entered the season of release. Now I need to tell you something very important about what not to do during this period, because there are specific behaviors that chosen ones engage in, often unconsciously, often out of deeply conditioned habit, that can slow or complicate the reception of what is already moving toward them. Do not shrink back into the familiar smallness out of fear that the shift is too good to be true. The voice that says, "This is probably not real," that you should not get your hopes up, that you have been here before and it did not last. That voice is the residue of the Chronos years speaking. It is the accumulated scar tissue of disappointments that were real and painful, and that taught your nervous system to protect itself by preemptively withdrawing from expectation. That protection served you in the seasons when hope was repeatedly deferred. But in this season, that same protection becomes the thing that keeps you at arm's length from what is already arriving. Recognize the voice. Do not obey it. Do not make any decisions from depletion during this period. If you are exhausted and a decision is not urgent, wait. If you are in a low point emotionally and something is asking you to close a door permanently, pause. The chosen one in the season of activation is not always going to feel activated. There will still be hard days. There will still be mornings where the shift feels distant and the wait feels close. Those days are not evidence that the movement has stopped. They are simply the rhythm of a human life, and the decisions you make from the bottom of those days should be held loosely until you can make them from a higher place. Do not explain yourself prematurely. There will be people in your life who will notice that something is shifting in you before it has fully manifested in visible ways. And some of those people, the ones who love you, but who are not yet able to hold the magnitude of what is coming, will ask questions that invite you to justify or defend or minimize what you are experiencing. You do not owe anyone a defense of your breakthrough before it has arrived. You do not need to make your transition legible to people who are not in the same season. What is happening in you is real, and it does not require external validation to be true. Protect the tender early shoots of what is growing by keeping them warm and close until they are strong enough to weather the exposure. Now I want you to feel something that I can only describe as the sensation of what is already inside coming to the surface. There is something in you that has been waiting, not just waiting in the Chronos sense, but waiting in the Kava sense, actively being assembled, being braided, being made strong under tension. And that something is now at the very surface. It is not buried anymore. It is not distant or theoretical or confined to the interior space where you have been keeping your most true and most vulnerable knowing. It is right here, right at the edge of visible, right at the threshold of manifest. You can feel it, can you not? That is not wishful thinking. That is not the performance of a feeling you are supposed to have. That is the genuine sensation of a chosen one standing in the first moments of their release season, feeling the movement of something enormous that has been building for years finally beginning to crest. If you feel it right now, I want you to type the word "rekink" in the comments, not as a performance, not to signal anything to the people reading alongside you, but as your own declaration, in your own voice, in the space of this community that is larger and more full of chosen ones than you might realize, that you are open, that you are here, that you are ready to receive what has already been set in motion on your behalf. Type it now if it is true, because the act of saying it, even in writing, even quietly, even in a single word, is itself a frequency signal. And frequency signals, as we have already learned today, are exactly what heaven responds to. The shift you just declared yourself open to is not arriving into an empty vessel. It is arriving into someone who has already been fundamentally changed by everything the waiting built in them. And before we move into the practical territory of what comes next, I want to give you something that I believe you have needed for a very long time. I want to give you a name for who you have become through this season. Not the name of what you do or what you produce, or what you are still waiting to step into. The name of who you already are right now, in this body, in this story, in this specific and irreplaceable life that has been shaped by years of pressure and persistence and the particular kind of refinement that only the long seasons can produce. The name I want to give you today is this: you are a wound breaker. I want to explain what that means with the fullness it deserves, because this is not a decorative title. It is a precise and weighty description of something real that you carry and something real that you do, whether or not you have ever had language for it before today. A wound breaker is someone who enters a lineage, a family line, a community, a sphere of influence, carrying wounds that were inherited rather than chosen. Wounds that were placed into the story before the wound breaker was old enough to consent to carrying them. Wounds of rejection, wounds of scarcity, wounds of silenced voice and deferred dreams, and the particular damage that comes from being in an environment that could not hold or honor or recognize what you carried. The wound breaker does not choose these wounds any more than Joseph chose the pit. They arrive as part of the territory of a specific calling. But here is what makes the wound breaker different from someone who is simply wounded. The wound breaker does not pass the wound forward. That is the break. That is the fracture point in a chain that has been running through generations, through communities, through patterns of behavior and belief that have been repeating themselves long before the wound breaker arrived on the scene. The wound breaker absorbs the wound, moves through the wound, is refined by the wound, and then does something that requires a specific and almost supernatural quality of inner strength. They stop. They refuse to let the wound become the instruction for how they treat the people who come after them. They choose, sometimes at enormous personal cost, to be the place where the pattern ends. That is you. The things you have been carrying that felt like personal failure or personal limitation. The ways the season of waiting seemed to isolate you and strip you and leave you without the markers of success that you watched other people accumulate. Those experiences were not evidence that you were less than. They were the specific and targeted formation of a wound breaker. Because you cannot break what you have not been inside of. You cannot interrupt a pattern that you have not been, formed by its pressure. The chosen one, who is called to be a wound breaker, has to go deep enough into the wound to understand it from the inside. And that descent, that years-long immersion in the territory of the wound, is what gives them the authority and the wisdom and the specific interior knowledge to be the one who ends it. You have been inside the wound. You know its geography. You know its language. You know the exact texture of the loneliness and the specific weight of the deferred promise, the particular sound of the voice that says, "You are not enough and never will be." You know all of it from the inside. And that knowledge, which has felt like nothing but a burden for all the years you have been carrying it, is actually the precise equipment you need for the assignment that is waiting for you on the other side of this threshold. Now, I want to take you somewhere. I want to guide you through something, and I am asking you to give me your full presence for the next few minutes. Not just your listening ears, but your imagination, your body, your willingness to inhabit a scene rather than simply observe it from a distance. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a metaphorical threshold in a vague, abstract sense, but a specific and sensory one. You are standing in a doorway. The frame is solid on either side of you, real enough to touch if you reached out your hands. Behind you is the room you have been living in. You do not need to turn around to see it. You know it completely. You know every corner of it, every shadow, every place where the paint has worn thin, from years of your hands resting against the same walls in the same spots. You know the particular quality of the light in that room at different times of day, and the specific sound the silence makes in the middle of the night when everything in you is awake, and the room offers nothing back. You know that room the way you know your own name. It has been your home and your holding place, and sometimes your prison, and sometimes the only thing that felt stable when everything outside it was uncertain. Now I want you to look at that room honestly, and I want you to recognize something about it that perhaps you have not fully allowed yourself to see before. That room held you. In all the ways holding can mean what is meant. It held you in the sense of containing you, of limiting what was possible within its walls, but it also held you in the sense of not letting you fall. The room that felt like confinement was also the room that kept you together during the years when the outside world did not have a space that could have safely held everything you were carrying. It was both. It was limitation and it was protection. And you can leave it now without hating it, without needing to condemn it or pretend it was something other than what it was. You can turn your face forward and take the step through the threshold without dragging the room with you and without pretending the room wasn't real. Now look forward, through the doorway ahead of you. I do not want you to manufacture a specific image of what is out there, because what is out there is larger than any image you could construct from the materials of your current imagination. What I want you to notice is not the content of what lies ahead, but the quality of the light. There is more of it. That is the first thing. Not blinding, not overwhelming, but unmistakably more. The kind of light that makes it possible to see further than you have been able to see for a very long time. The kind that does not hide the texture of things, but reveals it with a clarity that is gentle rather than harsh. And now I want you to notice something about where you are standing. You are not on one side of the threshold looking toward the other. You are in the threshold itself. Your feet are at the exact point where behind and ahead meet. You have one foot in the room you are leaving, and one foot in the space you are entering. And the most important thing I want you to understand about this moment, this specific and sacred position you are standing in right now, is that you did not arrive here by accident, and you did not arrive here by force. You arrived here by being exactly who you are, by carrying exactly what you carry, by persisting through exactly what you have persisted through. The threshold opened for you because you are the specific and prepared and braided and refined person that the threshold was waiting to receive. You are already standing in it. You are already here. The crossing is not something that needs to happen in some future moment when you feel more ready or more worthy or more certain. The crossing is happening right now, in this message, in this declaration, in the simple and profound act of a chosen one finally seeing themselves clearly enough to know that the threshold they have been reaching toward is the one they are already standing in. I want to speak a blessing over you now, quietly and personally, the way a blessing should be spoken. Not as performance and not as formula, but as a genuine and specific word for the specific person you are. May the weight you have been carrying find its proper resting place at this threshold and go no further with you. May the voice that has told you that you were too late or too small or too damaged for what was promised be replaced, permanently and completely, by the knowledge of who you actually are. May the relationships that are meant for the next season of your life find you with a speed and a naturalness that surprises you. May your calling, which has been living in you as a knowing, without yet a name, begin to speak itself clearly in the days ahead, until it is something you can hold and move with and offer to the world without apology. May the years that the waiting consumed be returned to you not as replacement, but as transformation, as a foundation so solid and so specifically yours that what is built on it cannot be shaken by anything the future holds. And may you walk away from this message knowing, not just believing, but knowing at the level where the truest things live, that you were chosen before you understood what that word meant, that the choosing has never wavered, and that what is waiting for you on the other side of this threshold is not a consolation for the years of difficulty, but the very thing that the years of difficulty were always, from the very beginning, building toward. You are a wound breaker. You are already standing at the threshold, and the light on the other side of it has been waiting for exactly you. The blessing I just spoke over you is not decoration. It is not the kind of language that sounds beautiful in the moment and then dissolves into the ordinary air of the next day without leaving anything behind. It is a word with weight, and I want you to carry it into what I am about to give you now, because what comes next is where the spiritual and the practical meet, where the inner transformation that has been happening across every part of this message begins to show up in the tangible, livable, day-to-day texture of your actual life. And I want to be specific. I want to be concrete. Because the chosen one who has done the inner work deserves more than inspirational language about what might happen. They deserve a clear and honest description of what is already beginning to take shape in 3 specific areas of their life. And they deserve to know exactly what they can do right now, today, in the hours that remain in this day, to cooperate with the movement that has already been set in motion. But before I give you the 3 areas, I want to address something practical that you can do right now, in the next few minutes, before you move into the rest of your day. Not as a prerequisite for what is coming, because what is coming does not require your performance, but as an act of alignment, a concrete and physical way of participating in the frequency shift that this message has already initiated in you. Go back to the return protocol from earlier in this message. The 3 steps: the unclaimed gratitude, the spoken declaration, the 7 minutes of silence. If you have not done it today, do it today, not tomorrow. Not when you are in a better mood or a clearer headspace or a more convenient set of circumstances. Today, right after this message ends. 7 minutes of silence with your eyes closed, preceded by 2 minutes of honest gratitude for what did not happen to you, and 1 spoken declaration in your own words about what you know to be true about this moment in your story. That is 10 minutes total. And those 10 minutes offered consistently every day for the next season will do more to accelerate the movement that has already begun than any amount of strategic planning or effortful pushing. And if you want to go deeper than the return protocol alone can take you, if you want to give your brain the specific neurological support that accelerates the shift from your current baseline frequency to the full gamma activation that your calling requires, the Genius Wave is available to you right now through the link in the comment. 7 minutes of precisely calibrated audio, used alongside the return protocol or in its place, that does what years of unaided practice can produce but in the time it takes to drink a cup of coffee. It is not a replacement for the inner work you have already done. It is a tool that makes the inner work more effective, that opens the neural pathways that allow the wisdom of the waiting years to translate into the clarity and creativity and intuitive precision of the activation season. $39 through the pinned link. 90-day guarantee, no risk, only access. Now let us talk about the 3 areas that are already beginning to transform, because you need to know what you are looking at when it arrives. The first area is relationships, and I want to be honest with you about what the relational shift of the activation season actually looks like, because it is not always comfortable, even when it is right. What you are going to experience in this area is a 2-part movement that happens more or less simultaneously. The first part is a natural and often quiet departure. People who belong to the season you are leaving will begin to create distance, not always through conflict or drama, though sometimes that is part of it, but often through a simple and mutual drift, a gradual loosening of the threads that connected you to certain people and certain relational dynamics that were formed in and sustained by the energy of the waiting season. Some of these departures will sting. Some of them will involve people you genuinely love and do not want to lose. And I want you to hold those losses with the honesty we practiced earlier in this message, acknowledging the real grief of them without interpreting them as evidence that something is going wrong. The departure of what belonged to the previous season is not a punishment. It is a clearing. It is the relational equivalent of the stripping that Joseph experienced before his elevation. The coat has to come off before the new garment can be put on. The second part of the relational movement is the arrival. And this is where I want you to pay very close attention, because the people who are coming into your life in this next season are going to arrive in ways that may not look like what you have been expecting. They are not necessarily going to arrive through the channels you have been watching. They are not necessarily going to look like what your previous experience of meaningful connection looked like. They are going to arrive at the right place and the right time, with a naturalness and an ease that will feel, especially in contrast to the effort that some of your previous connections required, almost surprising in its simplicity. You will recognize them, not through a dramatic lightning bolt of knowing, but through a quiet and sustained resonance. A sense of being understood without having to explain yourself extensively. A sense of being seen at the level where the truest things about you live. These are your next season. People. They are already in motion toward you. Your only job is to remain open enough to recognize them when they arrive rather than dismissing the simplicity of the recognition. Because you have been conditioned by the difficulty of previous connections to distrust anything that feels natural. The second area that is already transforming is your sense of purpose. And the shift here is going to feel, at first, almost anticlimactic, because it does not arrive as the dramatic and overwhelming revelation that the years of uncertainty made you hope it would. It arrives as a small step that becomes clear. One single, specific, actionable movement that presents itself with a quiet but unmistakable clarity that says this. This is the next right thing, not the whole picture, not the complete blueprint, not the answer to every question you have been carrying about your calling, just the next step. And the reason the activation season delivers purpose this way, one clear small step at a time rather than the full revelation all at once, is that the chosen one who has been through the formation of the waiting years is now equipped to take that one step with a quality of presence and a depth of intention that makes the step itself transformative. You are not receiving a map, you are receiving a direction. And the person you have become through the braiding of the waiting years is someone who can walk faithfully in a direction without needing to see the full destination, because the formation you have been through has taught you something that cannot be taught any other way. It has taught you to trust the process from the inside rather than requiring the outcome to be visible before you move. When that small, clear step presents itself, and it will present itself soon, do not dismiss it because it looks smaller than what you imagined your breakthrough would look like. Do not overlay it with the weight of everything it needs to eventually lead to. Simply take it. With full presence, with full intention, with the full weight of everything the waiting years built in you behind it. That single step, taken from that place, will unlock the next one, and the next one will unlock the one after that. And before long, the question of what you are supposed to be doing with your life will not be a question anymore. It will be an experience you are already living inside of. The third area is resources and opportunities, and this is the one that perhaps speaks most directly to the practical anxieties of the waiting season. The financial pressure, the professional stagnation, the sense that you have been locked out of certain rooms that your peers seem to move through freely. I want to speak to this area with both honesty and genuine expectation, because both are required. The honest part is this: the shift in resources and opportunities that comes with the activation season is not a lottery win. It is not the sudden appearance of everything you need in a form that requires nothing of you. It is something more organic and more sustainable than that. It is the experience of discovering that the gifts and the capacities and the specific combination of experience and wisdom and creative intelligence that the waiting years built in you are exactly what certain opportunities require, and that those opportunities are now in a position to find you rather than requiring you to find them. What this looks like practically is that the fight begins to leave the process, not all at once, not on every front simultaneously, but incrementally and unmistakably in specific areas that are directly connected to your calling. You are going to notice that things that previously required enormous effort and still produced minimal result are beginning to require less effort and produce more. Doors that were previously closed are going to open in ways that feel less like victories you earned and more like recognition you were always due. Connections that previously seemed inaccessible are going to present themselves through the natural movement of aligned frequency rather than through the exhausting performance of strategic networking. And here is the most important thing I want you to understand about the resource shift. You are not going to have to fight for what is yours anymore. That is the single most significant practical change of the activation season. The striving, the pushing, the exhausting effort of trying to force open doors that were not yet ready to open, that is the energy of the Chronos years, the years of positioning and preparation. The energy of the Kairos season is different. It is the energy of someone who has been made ready, who is standing in the appointed moment, who carries the specific frequency that the specific opportunity was looking for. In this season, getting what is yours does not feel like conquest. It feels like coming home. What you need to do right now is simple. Return to the practice. Use the tool if you have it. Stay open to the relational arrivals even when they come through unexpected channels. Take the small, clear step when it presents itself without demanding that it look as large as the calling feels, and release the striving. Not as a passive withdrawal from effort, but as a conscious decision to stop fighting the current and start moving with it. The current is already moving in your direction. The tide has turned. The seal is broken. The decree has gone out. And what is coming toward you right now, in these three areas and in every corner of your life that the formation of the waiting years has prepared, is not a consolation prize for the difficulty of the journey. It is the journey's destination. It is the thing the whole road was always leading to, and you are already standing close enough to it that if you were to reach out your hand right now, you would feel the warmth of it before you could even see it clearly. That warmth is real. That is not wishful thinking. That is a chosen one who has crossed the Kairos threshold, standing in the first moments of their release season, beginning to feel the temperature change that always arrives just before the full light breaks. Stay open, stay present, stay in the practice. What is coming has your name on it, and it has had your name on it for longer than you know. And nothing, not the years of waiting, not the stripping, not the silence, not the confusion, nothing has ever changed that. I want to take a moment before anything else and simply thank you. Not in the way that people say thank you, as a formality, as the customary closing gesture before moving on to the next thing. I mean something more specific and more sincere than that. I want to thank the part of you that showed up today, because showing up for a chosen one in the middle of a long and difficult season is not a small thing. It is not the casual, effortless act it might look like from the outside. Showing up when you are tired and when the evidence has not yet caught up with what you carry, and when the easier option would have been to close the tab and go back to the manageable numbness of an ordinary day, that kind of showing up requires something. It costs something. And the fact that you paid that cost today, that you stayed for all of it, that you let the hard parts land and the naming land and the blessing land, that is not nothing. That is everything. That is precisely the act of persistence that breaks seals and moves heaven and sets in motion the kind of divine response that this entire message has been describing. So I am not thanking you for watching a video. I am thanking the part of you that has not given up. The part that keeps finding its way back to the knowing, even when the knowing is inconvenient, and the evidence is contradictory, and the people around you cannot see what you see. I am thanking the part of you that typed a word in the comments today, or felt something move in you and did not immediately explain it away. I am thanking the part of you that recognized itself in the sadness and the strangeness and the recurring door and the repeated message. That part of you is the truest part, and it deserves to be honored, not managed, not minimized, not rushed past on the way to the practical application. Honored. Now I want to say something that I need you to receive not as a comfort statement, but as a factual and verifiable truth. You are not alone in this. I do not mean that in the abstract collective sense that people sometimes use to soften loneliness without actually addressing it. I mean it specifically and geographically and temporally. Right now, as you are sitting with this message, in whatever space you are in, at whatever time of day or night it is where you are, there are chosen ones on the other side of the world sitting with the same message. There are chosen ones in cities you have never visited, speaking languages you do not know, carrying stories that are different in their details and identical in their architecture to yours. There are chosen ones who woke up this morning carrying the same unnamed weight you have been carrying, who found their way to this exact message through paths that look nothing like the path that brought you here, and who are sitting right now with the same quiet recognition that you have been sitting with. Chosen ones do not always find each other in the ways that community is supposed to work, but they find each other. And the room you are sitting in right now is fuller than it appears. All across the world, other chosen ones are walking into this exact same message, and they are walking out of it carrying the same thing you are carrying. The knowledge that the season has turned, that the seal is broken, that the Kairos moment has arrived, and that what comes next is not more of what came before. Before I send you forward, I want to invite you to do one more thing. I want to invite you to lay something down. Not permanently, not in the sense of pretending it never existed, or that it did not cost you what it cost, but in the sense of not carrying it any further than this threshold. I want you to imagine, right now, in whatever way feels most natural to your particular imagination, that you are gathering up all of the heaviness, all of it, the unexplained grief, and the eroded confidence, and the silenced dreams, and the relational losses, and the career ground that the waiting consumed, and the long nights and the mornings that started with wait before they started with anything else. I want you to gather all of that up, not to examine it one more time, not to catalog it or analyze it or assign it meaning in this moment, but simply to hold it for one more second as the acknowledgement that it was real, that it happened, that it cost you, and that it is not the final word about your story. And then I want you to set it down, right here, at this threshold, right at the edge of what is behind you and what is ahead. Let it rest there. Let it be witnessed by the invisible company of every chosen one who has stood at this same threshold before you. Joseph in the pit, Ruth in the foreign field, David in the wilderness. Every person in every generation who carried something real through genuinely difficult terrain, and then stood at the place where the terrain changed. Let your specific and personal and irreplaceable burden join that collection of set-down weights at the threshold. It does not need to travel with you anymore. What it built in you travels with you. The burden itself can stay. Now I want to ask you something gently and genuinely. If this message has moved something in you today, if something in you was named or seen or released or clarified, would you consider doing something that costs you very little, but that carries the potential to change everything for someone else? Would you like the video? Share it. Subscribe to this channel so that more messages like this one can find their way to you. Not for me, not to inflate a number on a screen, so that this message can reach the next chosen one who is waking into their Monday without anyone to name it for them. So that the person who is sitting alone at 3 in the morning, carrying something they have never had language for, can find their way to a message that speaks their story back to them with enough specificity that something in them finally exhales. That person is real. They are out there right now. And the single act of sharing this message is the thing that puts it in front of them. Your engagement is not a metric. It is a ministry. And if you feel moved to go even further, if something in you wants to invest in the continuation of this work in a more direct way, the donation link is available, and every contribution, regardless of its size, goes directly toward making sure that more chosen ones in more corners of the world can access messages like this one. You do not have to give. But if this message gave you something today, if it returned something to you that had been missing, you are welcome to give something back in whatever measure feels right and true. There is one more thing I want to mention, and I want to mention it without pressure and without the language of urgency, simply as an honest and practical offering for the chosen one who is ready to give their brain the specific support it needs for activation that is already beginning. The Genius Wave is a real tool that does a real thing. It is not a replacement for the inner work you have already done, or the spiritual formation that the waiting years have built in you. It is a companion to all of that. 7 minutes of precisely calibrated audio, that guides your brain into the gamma frequency state that your calling requires, that opens the neural pathways for the kind of clarity and creativity and intuitive precision that chosen ones in their release season need to move effectively in the world. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, and you know in yourself that it is a yes, it is waiting for you in the pinned comment below. $39, 90-day guarantee, no pressure, just access. And if this is not the right moment for it, that is completely fine. The inner work you've been given today is already enough to begin with. What I want to leave you with, as the final and most essential thing, is not a call to action. It is not an instruction or a practice or a product or a challenge. It is simply this. You came here today carrying something, and you are leaving carrying something different. Not because I gave you something new, but because the act of staying, the act of receiving, the act of letting the naming happen, and the blessing land and the threshold become visible, that act did something in you that cannot be undone. The seal was already broken before you arrived here, but something in you was confirmed today. Something that has been true for a very long time was spoken into the open air in a way that makes it harder to argue with than it was this morning. And that confirmation, that hearing of your own story told back to you with clarity and care, is not a small thing. It is the kind of thing that changes how you walk into tomorrow. It changes the posture of the day. It changes what you are willing to believe about yourself when the ordinary resistance of an ordinary morning tries to reassert the old narrative. You are a wound breaker. You are standing at the threshold. The braiding is complete. The Kairos moment has arrived. The seal is broken. Gabriel has already responded. And what is coming toward you right now, through every channel that the alignment of this season has opened, carries your name on it and has carried your name on it since before you understood what you were being prepared for. Walk forward, not because you have everything figured out, not because the outer evidence has fully caught up with the inner knowing, but because the chosen one, who has been through what you have been through, who has persisted through what you have persisted through, who has arrived at this threshold, carrying the specific and irreplaceable formation of the waiting years. That chosen one does not wait for permission to step into what was always theirs. You are already inside it. Now walk like you know it. There is one final thing that needs to be said, and it does not need to be said loudly. It needs to be said the way the most important things are always said, quietly, personally, and with the full weight of genuine intention behind every word. You made it through this entire message, and I do not think that was an accident. I think the specific combination of words and ideas and invitations in this message found you today because something in the unseen architecture of your life recognized that you were ready to receive it. Not ready in the sense of having everything together. Ready in the sense of having been prepared, quietly and thoroughly and at great personal cost, for exactly this kind of encounter. You do not have to perform anything with what you received today. You do not have to immediately produce evidence that it changed you or demonstrate to anyone that something shifted. The shift is yours. It happened in the private and interior space where the truest changes always happen first, and it will show up in your outer life in its own time and in its own form, which will be more specific and more surprising and more precisely suited to your particular story than anything you could have scripted for yourself. Go gently into whatever comes next. Carry the name Wound Breaker like the true thing it is. Return to the practice. Use the tool if it called to you. Set the burden down at the threshold and do not pick it back up. And know this, simply and completely, and without any qualification. You were seen today, you were known today, and you are without question, without condition, and without any requirement to earn it further, chosen.